In my last video where I explained how we track the sun's movement in relation to one point here on Earth, I said something on the lines that I was also meaning to address solar radiation, solar intensity, and the impact on the different facades. But I said I thought it was gonna make the video just way too long. Well, this is that video. Well, this is this video. What? You know what I mean? By the end of this video, I will show an example of why this is important with a project that we were doing. You don't have to see the whole video just to see that. This is not a tactic of mine. You can just skip through. There are timestamps in the video. With that being said, let's get on with the video. Solar radiation is made up of two components, the direct and the diffused. Together, they make up the global. The direct is the one coming directly from the sun and hitting us. The one you essentially block when you stand in the shade. The diffused is the one that still hits you after bouncing around other surfaces, such as clouds, other buildings, the ground, etc. On a sunny day, if you're unobstructed, you would be exposed to 100% of a relatively high direct solar radiation component and proportionally low diffused solar radiation. Now, the opposite is true for a cloudy day. You would have a relatively high diffuse component getting to you. The overall global on a cloudy day would be significantly lower than on a sunny day. It is important to know that the more perpendicular a surface is to a source, the more of that radiation that surface is going to absorb. So horizontal surfaces would naturally absorb significantly more radiation than a vertical surface. So now let's pull up our first graph of the day, which shows the diffuse and direct components of solar radiation for our climate here in Brussels, Belgium. We plotted the direct component above the zero line and the diffused is the one going below it. These are the cumulative values for all 12 months. In the y-axis, you can read the intensity. Notice how in our particular weather, about half the global radiation is coming from the diffused component. And as you'll see in a minute, it's actually very hard to protect from the diffuse component. So it's crucial in this climate to protect from the direct. Pro tip, if you're blocking the direct, you're also blocking part of the diffuse. And you'll see why in just a minute. The sky view factor is exactly what it sounds like. The percentage of the sky you can see from one particular point. This is important because the diffuse component mainly comes from that sky. So if you can see less of that sky, you will get proportionately less diffuse component. Let me pull up the image I showed in my previous video. This is an image I took from Tilt House, one of our projects. In the last video I showed how to read this kind of graph. It's called a Augspach diagram, a stereographic projection. Now we're going to see the sky view factor from this point. What you can see of the sky from this point is significantly reduced. I would say it's somewhere around 25%. I should also point out that most of the light that are coming into a space come from the sky dome as well. So if you're concealing or protecting an area from the sky dome so as to protect the diffused, then you're also limiting significantly the light that is reaching your space. But more on that on another video when I cover daylight. When I analyzed the climate of Brussels in yet another video, which I will also link down in the description below, I broke down the year into 3 different climatic periods. It was warm, mild, and cool. Now you probably don't need me to point out to you that the solar radiation is significantly lower during the cool period than during the warm period. But the graph in itself is a bit misleading. Why is it misleading? Because I explained before that the more perpendicular a surface is to the source of radiation, the more of that radiation that surface would absorb. The datum for the graph I showed you is taken from a horizontal surface. So although it's true that the intensity of the sun becomes lower in the winter than during the summer, it's a bit exaggerated because solar angles are lower during the cool period than during the warm period. To illustrate this, I can pull up my solar dice, which I also showed when I analyzed the climate, and I can show you the solar radiation falling on each of the different facades for each of the different periods. Now keep in mind that the warm period has 3 months and the cool period has 5 months. It's interesting to see that during the cool period on some facades you have even more solar radiation than during the warm period. As you can see, this is not the case for east and west facades. In east facades you have twice as much solar radiation falling on it during the warm period than during the cool period. And again, this difference is only done in 3 months, whilst in the cool period it was 5. So I said it before and I'll say it again, southern facing facades here in the Northern Hemisphere are great. Not only because they allow us to have more sun when we need it, but also because it's easy to shade them from the sun that we don't want in the warm period. As good as southern aspects are, we cannot just turn our back to all other orientations. We sometimes have to play with these as well. As I'm having to do now with one of my current projects, I know that my main facade is west facing and there's nothing I can do about it. But I know that this is a problem. And why is this a problem? I'll tell you straight away. Without getting political, east is far better than west. Because although they're both exposed in a similar fashion to the sun, the difference is actually in the timing. Take a look at this other graph. Here I plotted the temperature of a warm and sunny day in August. In my graph you can read the time of the day in hours on the x-axis and the temperature on the y-axis on the right. For that particular day, I calculated the solar radiation falling on each of the different facades. And you can see the intensity on the left. Here are the values for the radiation falling onto the southern facade. Now the east, north and west. Can you see the elephant in the room? West facades get the majority of the solar radiation during the afternoon hours. Look at our comfort band, which we calculated in that video about comfort. See how our temperature is already significantly above our comfort band when the facade starts being exposed to the western sun. And see the intensity of this solar radiation. An unprotected west-facing window on this kind of day will overheat. And this is precisely why we must protect west-facing facades. As I mentioned in the last video where I discussed the solar movement, this is very hard to do. This is a small study we did in one of our projects we're doing, where we had a west-facing facade, so a scenario similar to the one I had here, but I had more flexibility. Here we broke down the project to see if we could orient our building to the south and have less of a perpendicular facade to that west orientation. This strategy, as you can see, had a significant impact on the way the sun was actually hitting our building, and it allowed us to strategically place our openings. Unfortunately, COVID hit and this project fell through amongst millions of others, I would imagine, and we didn't carry out the project. But if we had continued, we would have still had to protect those southern facades. Facing to the south does not mean we are free from solar protection. It simply means that that solar protection is going to be easier to achieve. Now let's sum up and put everything together. Protecting west facades just seems logical, like parking our cars underneath a tree on a sunny, warm day. However, we still seem not to be doing it as often. If we know how the sun moves and the solar intensity it has at the different hours and the different months, we can let our designs then be guided by the sun itself. Finally, if you're going to retain anything from this video, it must be the fact that even in this rather cool climate, we have to protect our openings from direct exposure to the sun, all the while allowing daylight levels to hit in. Well, that's all for this video though, so thank you for watching again, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! Bueno, espero que te bien, che.